Hello, everyone, and we are live. Happy Sunday and happy Father's Day to all of you. I hope whoever wants to celebrate with their father and show their appreciation is doing so today, and perhaps this is a nice break from the festivities to do this live stream with me. And yeah, I wanted to share one thing with you to kind of just give you an insight on my father's personality. So here's a thing he shared with me on this Father's Day. I'm just going to pull it up here. And I think I closed it. Darn. Okay, just give me a moment. I'm going to find it because this is pretty funny. Oh, where did it go? Technical difficulties. So I'm going to find that in a second, but one thing I wanted to talk about to kind of just get out of the way is the recent controversy that's been happening on Twitter with Apostate Prophet. So I'm not sure if any of you are aware of this, but Apostate Prophet is, I would say, one of the most or the most prominent ex-Muslim voice on YouTube and in social media, and his account on Twitter was suspended. So I have to be honest and say that I don't really know much beyond what I just said about it. I kind of just found out about it earlier today, and so I'm not going to be talking about it in this live stream because I just don't have the information. Um, I might do a Q&A at the very end, and if someone wants to ask or share what happened, maybe we can do that at the very end. But I want to keep this live stream focused on the issue of climate change and does being religious make you care less about it? Which is a very interesting idea and one that I always thought about because this life isn't the most important. If you're, let's say, a Muslim or a Christian, it's the afterlife that counts for the most. And I think because of that, there's also this idea, this belief that something that will usher in the end of this world and will bring in the afterlife faster is a good thing. So that's just like the quick introduction. I'm going to go into it a little bit more in a couple seconds, but that's a general idea. And I wanted to explore it, both the ideas that kind of support that notion that maybe people who are religious tend to care less. I don't have any stats to prove that. This is just a discussion. So I also want to talk about the possibility that, if anything, it's the opposite. And as I mentioned in the video description and when I was previewing this live stream, call-ins are welcome. So feel free to just share your own opinions and perspectives on it after I give my little introduction. And I've got a few people here in the live chat. Good to see you, Music Guy. Music Guy says, you're not an atheist activist until you've been banned from Twitter. Welcome to the gang, Apostate. I think Prophet, not Apostate Aladdin. I don't think Apostate Aladdin has been banned from Twitter yet, as far as I'm aware. So yeah, and I do have a few people ready in the private chat to just come in with their perspective. I've got Zagros, who some of you might know, and I think I also got Robert. Hello to both of you. So yeah, I just wanted to give my little introduction here. And oh, we're joined by Elsa in the live chat as well. Elsa is the loyal subscriber who actually came up with the idea for this live stream, who suggested it. Might be an interesting thing to explore. So just to get things started, I wanted to just tell you the other thing that inspired this live stream, which was a report that recently came out from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC. So it does these pretty frequent reports just on the status of global warming and our efforts to kind of tackle it, and basically how in trouble are we right now. And there was a really alarming report that came out in April. I'm going to pull it up here if I can find it. So yeah, it's right here. I hope you can read that. So what the report basically says is that we have a very limited chance of limiting global heating to 1.5 Celsius above pre-industrial levels, which has been the goal, the standard for a long time. And essentially, this is really simplifying things, but anything beyond that, like 2 degrees Celsius or 3 degrees Celsius, would be very catastrophic and life-changing for most people, or probably all the people on the planet. And so the report says that overshooting 1.5 Celsius is now almost inevitable, but the overshoot could be temporary and temperatures could be returned to 1.5 Celsius by the end of the century if we reduce greenhouse gas emissions drastically this current decade. So some suggestions are technologies such as carbon dioxide removal to limit and reduce carbon dioxide concentration in the atmosphere. And another goal is to get this is that we need to reach net zero emissions by 2050. So as you can see here, the problem is we're planning far too many new coal-fired power plants, gas installations, other fossil fuel infrastructure. So we're basically focusing on these technologies that led us to this problem, and we're still, growing them, which is a huge issue. And the thing that really scares me about this is, according to another section of that report, we're actually on pace now for 3 degrees Celsius, I think, by the end of the century. So uh, it's a scary thing. And the report says it's now or never. Like, this is a pivotal time where we need to change things, and this has to be done drastically right now. And it's a lot of people say, well, the onus should be on corporations and governments to do this. But I think the change, and the report agrees that this has to come from each and every one of us. We need to change our lifestyles, whether that's traveling less, using our cars less, using public transit more, eating less meat, because meat consumption is directly connected to methane, which is contributing to warming as well, from the animals we eat. And so there's a lot of things we can do, but obviously we as individuals can only do so much. The onus really has to be on governments and corporations to make the biggest change, because it's just easier for them to do that than for each and every individual to do that. And I think it's tough to say. I mean, some people might be blaming countries like Brazil or India or China for lagging behind because, their economies aren't as developed as, let's say, the ones in North America or Western Europe. And so they're still following the method of like 20 years ago, 40 years ago. But trying to assign that kind of blame game, I don't think is very useful in that sense. We all should be doing more. We should all be encouraging more, whether it's an individual, government, association, institution, whatever it is. So that's my quick introduction of just the issue that we're all facing. And this is something that's going to impact all of us. I mean, if water levels go up, cities like Amsterdam, New York, countries like Bangladesh, big chunks of them are going to go underwater, and there's going to be mass migration. And there's parts of the world that are already hot now that are going to be intolerable to live in. We're going to see, I mean, you probably all already know this, but we're also going to see more extreme weather events, hurricanes, tornadoes. And so this is something that if you have kids right now, we really don't know how bad life is going to be by the time they're 40, 50, and when they're having kids. And so it's really about what kind of future we want to create for our children. And so this is where the subject of religion comes in. So I'm not blaming religion for climate change. I'm not saying that a religious mindset in and of itself is leading to climate change. I think it's clear to see that the main instigator of climate change is simply capitalism. It's really capitalism that's doing it. This drive for growth and seeking profit, in short-term profit, and forgetting the long-term consequences of seeking that short-term profit that has gotten us into the situation. It's almost like it's this machine that's going and chugging along, and there's we're all part of this machine, but there's really no one at the helm. There's no one at the steering wheel. It's kind of just going on its own, and we're all there for the ride. And there's so many of us that know, okay, things are getting really bad with this stuff, and we need to slow down. But the machine is just going, and it's just this profit-driven machine. This is the reason why we're still using fossil fuels to the extent we are, because right now there's more profit in doing it, despite the fact that we know we need to switch to green technologies now. It's just that kind of thinking doesn't necessarily work in a capitalist mindset, especially when we have, companies that are trying to just get their quarterly profits really high, although that is changing. So I think that is the main problem. But what I always wonder is, what is religion's role in this, and is it making things better or worse? So I have I've kind of determined this way of categorizing religious people in four four different ways, and people calling in can agree with me or disagree with me, and feel free to give your own opinion in the live chat. So I should mention actually that there is a poll in the live chat. So I simply ask the question: does being religious make you care less about climate change? You can say yes or no. Right now, it's no winning at 67%, and 33% say yes, being religious does make you care less about climate change. So that's interesting. I did do a poll earlier when I was previewing this live stream, which had a slightly different wording of the question. And the wording of that question was: does being religious make you more likely to care less about climate change? So for that one, 75% said yes, and 25% said no. So completely different result in today's poll. Let's see if it changes. I would say it does make you more likely to care less about climate change, and I'm gonna explain why right now. So categorizing them by four different groups. So the first group, and I think this one is in the minority, it's the people who believe that there's climate change happening, but that it isn't man-made, it's the will of God, and that we should just let it happen and let life on this planet as we know it be destroyed. It will usher in the end times, and all the better, because then the afterlife will come faster and the believers will go to paradise, sinners will go to hell. So this is just I would say the Christian Muslim mindset for the most part. So you have that one group, and then you have the second group who they might believe that climate change is man-made. So they're different from the first group in that way, but they don't necessarily want to do much about it for the same reason. They believe that it is us being sinful, and so it is fair to be punished for, just ruining the gift of this planet that God has given us. And all the better that the end times will come, judgment day will appear, and climate change is just one of the signs of the approaching judgment day. And then we'll get to paradise where everything will be better. So that's the second group. The third group is the group of people who believe climate change is real. They think it's man-made, and they want to do something about it, but they feel hopeless. They don't know what to do. It feels so overwhelming. So they take comfort in the promises of their specific religion, that everything will be better in the afterlife, and although things are really horrible right now, don't worry. You just have to persevere and try to be the best person you can, and do good, follow God's commands, and then you'll get the rewards of the afterlife, where you don't have to worry about things like climate change and the suffering that's going to come with that. So that's group number three. And then there's the group number four, which I hope isn't a minority, but I don't really know. And this is the group that the religious, they they do want to fight climate change, and they do think it's man-made, and they are making concerted efforts to try and tackle and fight climate change. And so they may be taking comfort, and they do believe in an afterlife, but they still believe that this world is ours to conserve and protect and safeguard and help flourish, and they want to do that, and they're fueled by their religion to do that. So those are the four groups. So here's my main concern. And I'm going to specifically talk about the religions I know best. So I'm going to talk about Islam and Christianity and their whole conception of the meaning of this world, and the fact that they're in their beliefs that there is this afterlife. I think this belief in an afterlife and a belief that, we're here to be tested by God and that everything that happens is God's plan taints all four groups. So not just the first two that don't really want to do anything about climate change. I think it taints all of them because deep down inside you, and I can say that I felt the same way when I was Muslim, when I was religious. It's just this feeling of, well, this life isn't as important as this afterlife. Sure, it's important because it's our deeds here that determine where we end up, but this afterlife is what matters the most. Like, the things here just aren't as much of a priority when you look at the world that way. Everything you look around you, your job, even your relationships, they take second place to being with God, being united with God. That's the main priority if you properly, follow what those religions teach. And I think what happens when you do that is you're going to lose that little bit of motivation, maybe a lot of motivation, to try and make the world a better place, to try and stave off the severe problems that we encounter. And I've talked to many religious people, and this is anecdotal, so don't use this as like some kind of overarching evidence for this being true. But I've talked to many people who are theists, whether they're Christians or Muslims or other religions, Jewish people as well. And there's this, I would use the word fatalistic element of their view on things like the problems that we have in the future. So things like climate change or possible global nuclear war. There's a feeling of God wills what he wills, and we just have to follow God's plan. And I can't help but think, when you view the world that way, it takes away your agency in thinking how much of an impact we can have on the world and making it a better place. And it takes away the motivation, as I said earlier, because we're focused on the afterlife. So can you really care about climate change and how it's going to destroy this planet as much as, if you're a believer in the afterlife, as much as someone who doesn't think there's an afterlife and that this world is all there is? I don't think so. I don't think so at all. So that's my quick summary on my thoughts on the subject. I'll expand a little bit as we do the call-ins, and we do have, wow, it looks like we have 4 people ready to go in. So I have Zagros, who some of you might know, who's appeared in call-ins before. So he's ready to go first. So Robert, Friendly Muslim, and Rev Tacos, that's an interesting name, Rev, are also in the private chat. So Robert, Friendly Muslim, and Rev Tacos, if you want to call in, just let me know in the private chat, and then I'll get you on after Zagros. All right, okay. And okay, Robert is ready. So Robert, you're going to come in second after Zagros. So Zagros, whenever you're ready, I'll add you to the live stream. And Friendly Muslim, you'll be on third. Okay. So Zagros, you're coming in 3, 2, 1. Oh,
Actually,
I caught you while you were drinking water. Sorry about that. Zagros, you there?
would you mind taking in the Robert to drink water?
Okay, all right.
Can you hear? Yeah, all
Yeah,
right.
yeah, I can hear you. Okay,
Sorry about that.
Robert, if you're ready to go, just let me know. Okay, I'll just wait for Robert for a second. Okay, Robert is confirmed ready to go. Okay.
Hey, can everybody hear me all right?
Okay, Robert, I can hear you. Welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me. So I had so much fun researching for this call-in because I noticed, I didn't think much of it until now, but I did notice a really strong environmentalist trend in certain Jewish circles in North America, particularly those who are not so much Orthodox. So generally, I'm probably going to be using the word progressive and Orthodox a lot. Progressive Judaism, in this case, I just mean non-Orthodox, because they're almost like different religions, to be honest. But I noticed a certain type of circle, which is very social justice oriented, very vegetarian for some reason, and very religious, and very Jewish. And I always wondered, like, I always assumed it was because there's this one particular holiday called Tu B'Shvat, which is thought of also is sometimes called the New Year of the Trees. And it is, you're supposed to plant certain trees. And nowadays it's basically treated as like a Jewish Earth Day. So in Israel, they plant trees on that day. And so I always thought it was because of that, but actually I looked it up, like, just to get more details to see like the history of like Judaism and environmentalism. And oh my God, there was a whole article on the exact circle of like people that I was just talking about, like that particular progressive Jewish circle. And basically a lot of it, so this particular trend goes back apparently to the 60s or 70s during the civil rights movement. For some reason, there was a large Jewish involvement in the civil rights movement. I kind of think it's because there was this one rabbi called Abraham Joshua Heschel who was very, very heavily involved in the civil rights movement. And I think that his publications and works really influenced Jewish thought, which is why there's such a huge overlap between like social justice and apparently vegetarianism is a documented phenomenon like in these circles too. As for whether being Jewish actually makes you like that, it's harder to answer. Like, it's not a very easy question to answer, because here's the thing: not everybody who is religious has all of their beliefs impacted by their religion. I'll give you a really, really good example. So my beliefs on Zionism, I had these beliefs before I became Jewish. I have them now, and if I even leave, I will still have them. And that's that I'm not a Zionist and that I'm anti-Zionist. But this view has nothing to do with religion. I didn't come to this because of my religion, and I can imagine that for a lot of people, environmentalism would be the same thing.
So do you mean in the sense that it's just seen completely to be a completely non-religious subject?
I think it is for some people, and that should be acknowledged, because not everybody's religious beliefs impact how they feel about environmentalism. Me, for example, like I said, I had these views before I became religious, and if I stop being religious, I probably will continue to have them. And I don't think as many religious people are as willing to admit that sometimes you just believe things just because you do, not because your religion tells you to. So that's an example for Judaism. And I think that in Judaism, it's one of those religions where it's hard to separate culture and religion. So it's hard to know if this is just a cultural Jewish construct that became a thing in the 60s or 70s, or if it is actually predicated in the religion. And there's definitely a pretty good argument that it is, and also a pretty good argument that it isn't. So I am on the side of, like I said, believing that I think people have their beliefs first and then maybe justify it with their religion after. But I will mention a group of religions that I would love to know if there's anyone from these religions in this chat. If you are, please say so. Is indigenous ethno-religions. I'll give you an example of an indigenous religion that I think is definitely you need to be an environmentalist in order to be able to fully practice this religion, is the religion of the Baka people. The Baka are a hunter-gatherer, not hunter-gatherer. They're a nomadic forager group from the Congo, and they live in the Congo rainforest, and they've been living there for like hundreds of thousands of years. And so in their religion, they have a particular coming of age ceremony for boys, since there is a lot of they do a lot of hunting. And it involves being able to survive in the forest for a certain period of time, and to be able to know how to hunt and forage. And so if this religion was completely fine with destroying the environment, letting, disease and bad things run amok in their forest and to deforest everything, then they wouldn't be able to practice their religion. And I noticed that's true for a lot of tribal groups, that they have a spiritual connection to their land. Oh, another thing that's worth mentioning is that even though these indigenous groups are only about less than 5% of the population, they occupy more than 80% of the world's critical biodiversity areas, like the Amazon rainforest, even the Congo rainforest that I was just talking about. And they, again, it's very, I haven't, like, it's very hard to find specific details about the practices and beliefs of these religions. But I did learn something interesting from a CBC podcast, which is that the Inuit were aware of climate change in the 50s and 60s, and that if we had listened to them, we would have known about it at first. And that's partly because, like many other religions in North America and cultural groups, they have that societal importance. Because think about it, if they were to overhunt and to deforest and to take up all the resources, they would never be able to survive.
Well, also, it would be their part of the world that would be seeing the impacts more drastically than others too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There are sometimes, the Inuit are sometimes called the canary in the coal mine of climate change, because like when the same piece of ice has been there for 10,000 years and then you see it melt, that's a problem. What else? Oh, and there's one final example that I'll give, and then you can give your thoughts, is there's a tribal groups called the Andamanese, and I'm actually writing a little research paper about them. They live in islands off the coast of India, and so some of my research, I found that they have oral histories of sea level rises, like historic sea level rises, and linking it with certain deities, certain gods. And one of them is, there's an island in this archipelago called Channel Island. And so there is a myth about one of the lesser minor spirits actually used to live on that island before it was submerged, and they have found, like through diving or whatever, that there is actually a submerged island there. So, I mean, being aware of the coastline and stuff doesn't make you environmentalist on your own, but it certainly shows a level of awareness that I think is lacking in other religions. And again, if there's anyone from these religions, please, please, please say so in the comments. I would love to hear from you and what you think.
Yeah, please do.
But yeah, tell me what you believe, or I mean, what you think about what I said.
So the first thing that comes to mind, Robert, and by the way, thank you so much for taking the time to just research all this for the call-in. I do appreciate that. Very interesting. And I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is it really comes to what kind of worldview or ethos that religion teaches. So as you pointed out, there are religions that really encourage our role to, preserve the balance of this planet, or just the ecosystem that we're in.
Yeah.
And really emphasizes that we have to do that as a priority. And I think with other religions, there's this kind of apocalyptic, doomy aspect to it. And I think it's reflective of the times that people are living in when these religions were first formed, where, there's this impending disaster and things are going to be terrible. And when those people are hopeless, then they just turn to, well, there's the afterlife. And everything will be okay then. I think it's kind of similar in a sense, because it's a coping mechanism, but different kind of way of doing it. So some religions, they might emphasize your role to try and make it better, but others might be saying, well, don't worry about this, things are bad, but everything will be righted again. And I think those two elements do exist within the same religions too.
Yeah.
It's just one will take priority over the other. So I think it really depends on how the religion is being taught and how its principles are reflected in the actions of its followers.
Like in practice, yeah.
In practice, yeah. And I did want to highlight just this one comment from someone that I think is relevant.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. I'll just call you Label. Label, thank you for this comment. Label says, I'd say that taking care of what God has provided us with should make believers care more, but in practice, we always see religious people gravitating towards capitalism or general right-wing politics. So I think that's interesting because a lot of people don't really practice what the religion preaches. So that is an important factor.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you can interpret those religions to be reflective of those people's attitudes towards, capitalism and the conservative right-wing politics. So within those religions, I think it is also the person's attitude, which makes it a bit difficult. I think my problem is that being seduced by specifically the belief in an afterlife is what makes the idea of tackling climate change so difficult for some religious people. So it's that afterlife, it's the alternative. I think you can, last thing I'll say, Robert, and then I'll let you add your own input, is I think you can even see that in religions that teach reincarnation, because then people will have this attitude, well, I'm just going to die, maybe this world will end, but then there's going to be something new. And as long as I do my part, or I do good as much as I can, then I'll come back and have another chance, or some variation of that. I'm really simplifying it there. But the idea is this isn't all there is, so it might be less of a priority than compared to someone who thinks that this is all there is.
Would it be accurate to say that one of the main reasons why you see religion at odds with climate change is because of the way that an afterlife warps your perception of this life?
Exactly. It just
think of
makes
any
it less
other
significant.
reasons? Yeah.
I
Like
think
other reasons why religion, because that's what I was thinking about a lot too, because some of these indigenous religions are not very theistic, not very theistic. They don't have an afterlife. And same thing with Judaism, depending on who you ask. But I could still, I'm still trying to think of like non-afterlife related things that, I thought of a great paper that I think you should read. I will go, I haven't read it, but I never thought it would come in handy until now. So there's a scholar of Iranic history named Richard Fultz, and I remember him, and he's an environmental activist, and I remember him writing some sort of research paper about Islamic views in environmentalism, and some of them had to do with their relationship with dogs and biting things, and also the natalist aspect. So you know what? I will look it up. I will post the title in the comments, and
okay.
I haven't read it, but I'm sure it will be interesting to you.
Okay, maybe we can chat about it after later on.
Yeah.
You can email it to me too if you'd like.
Yeah, I will, because I have subscriptions to all of these through my university.
Awesome.
So yeah, let's see, what else do I have to add? And yeah, another reason why I really emphasize that like religion isn't always what influences a religious person's decision. Judaism is such a huge like specific example, because so remember how I said that this the strain of Jewish people who have this environmentalist leaning are often social justice oriented. So the people amongst them who are anti-Zionist are that way because of social justice, and the people who are Zionist say that they are that way because of social justice. So that is a very clear...
So the same exact thing can be just...
Yes, and they both believe that their religion makes them say that, which is like very interesting. Like I spent most of this afternoon trying to like disentangle those two groups. Like, yeah. So I think that's all I have to say.
Well, thank you so much for sharing, Robert. Glad to have you on. And we have quite a few people waiting. So if it's okay with you, Robert, I'll jump to the next person.
Yeah.
Feel free to hang out in the live chat and continue sharing.
Yep. Okay.
Zagros, are you ready? Okay, are you drinking water? Okay, I think Zagros is ready. He's fully hydrated. Before I get to him, I just wanted to say welcome to Hassan Radwan. Thank you so much for joining. And so him just commenting on what we were discussing earlier about the religious mentality, especially when it comes to afterlife. I believe that's what Hassan is referring to. This mentality can be a recipe for inaction. And he says in Arabic, وَاسْتَعِينُوا بِالصَّبْرِ وَالصَّلَاةِ, which basically means just rely on patience and prayer. So rely on those things, rely on God, and everything will be okay. And that's a scary thing to have, especially when, as I mentioned earlier, the report is saying we need to take action right now as individuals, as governments, corporations, businesses, whatever it is. But all right, Zagros, I'm going to get you in 3, 2, 1.
Hi, SS.
Hey, sorry about that earlier. I didn't realize when I was looking that you were chugging a bottle of water.
No. It really happened all of a sudden. I was sick and still am kind of suffering from it. You probably can hear it from my voice.
A little bit, yeah.
Sorry. If at any point I become incomprehensible, please let me know. No.
I will do so.
Thank you.
Yeah, Zagros. So, great thing to have you here. And so I noticed that you were talking a little bit about the apostate prophets controversy on Twitter. So if you want to maybe fill in the viewers at the very end of this live stream when we do like a little Q&A, want to hang out for that?
Yeah, sure.
We can do it then. Yeah, because
Sure.
I think it is important to talk about it. I'm just being honest. I don't really know much about it, and I'm kind of torn about how I feel about apostate prophets. So yeah, we can talk about that at the very end. But yeah, so
sure.
Also, let's see where we are in the poll now. So the poll has completely changed. So to the question, does being religious make you care less about climate change? 61% say yes, 39% say no. All right, so it has kind of reversed. But yeah, Zagros, so same question to you. Do you think, I know it's kind of a general question, but I wanted to keep it a bit general. Do you think being religious makes you care less about climate change?
I actually did not vote in the poll because I wasn't really sure how I felt about the question. I kind of agree a little bit with Robert. Oh, by the way, I just wanted to say that it looks like we're in good company. I heard the name of Robert, with whom I'm kind of familiar, friendly Muslim, Reverend Tacos.
I don't know Reverend Tacos, so it'll be.
I know him. He's cool. Okay. He's a nice guy. Right. Yeah, and yeah. So I wanted to say that, as Robert said, I agree with that. Religion doesn't necessarily, make it such that people will be less sensitive or less cognizant of climate change. I think it has more to do about dogmatism. And religion, I think, also falls under the umbrella of dogmatism. Because I think, as you would also agree, we see that people can partition their cognition. We see Christians who also are cognizant of geology or the true age of the planet and so on. So I think it's more about dogmatism. But I also want to add to it that it's not also necessarily religious dogmatism, because I've read some peer-reviewed papers which correlated to a high degree religiosity with right-wing or conservative tendencies. It was shown that the more religious people become, the more right-wing tendencies or right-to-center tendencies they tend to exhibit, and vice versa. Right-wing tendencies, people who have right-wing tendencies prefer for things to remain as they are. They are not really big fans of change, social change.
They find the strength in tradition and maintaining order to fight chaos and unpredictable things that come along in life. I'd say that's accurate. Yeah.
Yeah, they prefer homeostasis. Change is somewhat intimidating. And given the high correlation between right to left, right to center tendencies and religiosity, I think those two get intertwined, and it becomes somewhat unclear as to what the cause of denial of, I don't know, vaccine or climate change, etc., is coming from. So I think that's I think why I wasn't sure how I felt about the question.
So just to make sure I understood you correctly, so you think it's specifically the dogmatic aspect of maybe the religion and also just the right-wing mindset that is the issue.
Yeah,
So
because
it's just dogmatism specifically.
yeah, maybe not necessarily. I mean, I'm not an expert in any way, shape, or form. Just from some of the literature and some books and scientists and whatnot and sociologists I've listened to, it seems that there is such a thing. Because even though you might present someone who is religious also right-leaning, all the evidence that would normally be sufficient to convince someone of the dangers of climate change, just simply because they want things to remain as they are, they might decline even your advances of attempts to try and convince them, or they might shut their eyes, or they might just remain in that disbelief.
Yeah, the ostrich who keeps his head in the sand and like everything's okay, nothing's gonna go. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess kind of like that. So yeah, that's why I didn't want to vote, because I don't think it's that simple of a question.
No, that's a fair point to make. I guess the best way to look at the question is just to be a conversation starter, because nothing when it comes to these kinds of subjects is that simple. There's a lot of gray area. There's a lot of things that are, that we can talk about. How I wouldn't say necessarily being a secular person, but being materialist and just focused on making yourself more successful, more rich, whatever it happens to be, that might be a big cause of this problem. There's a part of me that always wonders, is it possible that I think there's an expression, I can't remember exactly what it is now, but if you aren't a liberal when you're young, then you're spineless, and if you aren't conservative when you're older, then you're an idiot, something like that. And it's kind of this idea that people tend to become more conservative and they want to hold on to tradition when they're older. They don't want to change things as much. So I sometimes wonder, is the lack of proper action against climate change a little bit rooted in the fact that all these people who are in power are these old people who are conservative and who maybe aren't as concerned with what the world's going to be like in 2060 or 2040 when they're all dead. So this is just like a feeling. I'm not saying that I think that this is the case, but I sometimes wonder about it.
I think there certainly would be it certainly would be a factor.
And maybe well, I just want to add one more thing. Sorry to interrupt you, but maybe they think, oh, we'll get our kids these really fancy swank bunkers where they can survive the desert hellscape. Or there's that movie Elysium, the Matt Damon movie, where all the rich people just went to the space station off planet, where they lived in luxury as all the poor people just lived in squalor and in misery in the climate change ravaged world. So maybe that's what they're thinking.
Well, so I try to give people the benefit of the doubt. Like, I don't think any significant number of humans would really sincerely want to see the destruction of the ecosystem, unless you are part of a doomsday cult or some such, like the Jehovah's Witnesses, perhaps. So when people deny something or are resistant or resisting, the evidence and etc., I try to think that it's not because they want to see the planet and the ecosystem destroyed, but just that we have not been able to convince them, and also perhaps that they have not partitioned their cognition in such a way that allows such informations to intrude their mind and actually convince them from within. Also, by the way, are we allowed to cuss on your channel?
Go ahead.
Okay, because I'm such a pedantic motherfucker, I wanted to like say something. Like you said, that climate change will destroy the planet. I'm pretty sure that's not what you meant, but like the planet will be fine. It's just that the life on it will kind of get messed up.
Well, I suppose what I mean is that a lot of animals will die,
Yeah,
not just us
yeah,
humans. Like,
yeah,
but I see your point. Yeah, the
yeah,
the the world the world will still continue to exist and will keep
yeah,
going on. If we're gonna be on it is
yeah. That's
another
true.
question altogether. Yeah, and by the way, nice compliment from Jamal. Both of these guys got very nice beards, mashallah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jamal. And thank you, Hassan. So the saying is, if you are not a liberal when you are young, you have no heart, and if you are not a conservative when old, you have no brain. Yeah.
I also want to add, everyone is wrong. Some people are a little bit less wrong. The people on the left are wrong to a certain degree. People on the right are wrong to a certain degree. The key thing is to be able to see the truth, or I don't know, the usefulness in arguments and strategies developed on both sides of the spectrum. And that's the importance of occasionally stepping on the center block, like being on the center and being able to listen to both people left of center and right of center, because they both have merits. Their arguments have merit. But also, I'm not a big fan of like univariate analysis in any domain. So, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I might have heard you say that the cause of climate change was capitalism. Could you clarify on that or develop on that? Because I have a contention with that argument, if it is
Okay.
indeed what I understood it to be.
So I agree with you. You can't say there's just one thing, obviously. But I would word it as the following: that I think capitalism is a primary instigator fueling our drive that has led to climate change. You could maybe call it an unintentional side effect because, as I mentioned, it's like this machine that's going, chugging along, and there's all sorts of side effects like the great wealth disparity and inequality that we're witnessing. So it's hard to say that it's capitalism's fault necessarily as an ethos, but when it's a side effect, as we're seeing, I think we can level the blame at it in that sense, because the focus is on profit and growth, and it's almost like parasitic. Like it just grows, grows, grows. Well, one example I think I've mentioned it on the channel before, but maybe not. Where if you think about like say animals like rabbits in the savannah, where they just follow their nature, their instinct, and breed and breed and breed and breed, and they overpopulate, and then there's this mass starvation because there's too many of them, and then they just go back down, and it's like a cycle. And I think capitalism works in the same way, where capitalism won't care if there's a mass extinction event and 5 billion people die. If there's still 1 billion people, the machine will just keep chugging and growing again, and then until the next mass extinction event.
Also, before I respond, would you mind defining capitalism the way you understand capitalism to be?
That's a good
Because I
question.
want to make sure that we are actually arguing the same thing.
I mean, that's a very good question. I don't know how I would define it simply because it's a pretty big term. I would just say it is a mode of production that we're currently in that emphasizes profit. I know that's like a very simple definition. Emphasizes profit and growth. So it really depends on some kind of value as well. So let's say money, currency.
I disagree with that definition.
Go ahead, share yours.
I think what you just said can be a symptom that can be observed in people who follow a capitalistic, style of economy. But I don't agree with that definition, because, like, in my view, and I would hope that you or anyone else watching would correct me. But from what I understand, capitalism is merely the act of multiple humans coming together to accrue their respective capabilities, means, and resources to build projects that wouldn't otherwise be easily built
This
by
is
one
actually
individual.
it's actually starting to sound like communism or socialism, the way you just defined it.
I would disagree with that as well, because what do you do? Like, let's say I want to build a building.
Yeah.
Nor do I have enough wood, nor do I have enough manpower, nor do I have enough any sort of resources to be able to build that building on my own. So I talked about this project to other people in my village or in my community, and I asked them to contribute their own resources to gather a capital, that the purpose of which will be to build that project altogether, because one individual alone cannot necessarily do it. So that's what I understand capitalism to be. And the way I understand it, there is nothing in it that dictates or says that we have to, like, mass the planet up. And I'm not saying that that's what you said, but just to talk what I think. So as I said, the way you defined it, I think it has side effects, such as we see, like, climate change, because we just keep getting together, keep building more and more and more, without any regards to what we do to our environment. But that's not, I think, a direct result of capitalism, but a result of us just not being aware of the causes of what we do, the effects of what we do. So if properly regulated and people properly educated and made aware, I don't think capitalism in itself can harm the planet. And I actually think that this system of capitalism will also be the key to solving this climate change issue. So
I hope so.
I cannot build on my own a company that will one day invent a carbon capture technology on my own, but I will gather people and their resources and have them contribute towards this capital, so that we can build this research and development company, maybe even take it public, and start working on it. Like, I don't really see how your understanding of capitalism is congruent with, like, what it actually is, at least in my view.
Okay. Well, I don't want to spend too much time on this, just because then it's going to become like an economic discussion. I do understand your definition and why we differ. What I would say is the way you described it is adding things to what capitalism is precisely. So the way I would frame it is, what you're talking about is why people gravitate towards something like capitalism, because they see it as a way of getting those kinds of things accomplished. But I would say capitalism in of itself is not designed or intended to be, well, this is to help people make things together and work together, which I would say is where it sounds like socialism or communism to me. It's just about profit. It's about growth and profit and whatever that happens to be. So you don't necessarily have to be a group of people or working together. You could just be, it just has to do with it not being run by a government, if that makes sense. But I don't want to get bogged down into this too much. I think your key point is there, that if it is regulated, hopefully we can address the problems of climate change, because whether we like it or not, whether we're supporters of capitalism or not, capitalism is going to be around for the next at least century. I'm going to say there's not going to be, unless there's some major upheaval. Capitalism is what we've got, so we have to work within the capitalist framework. As much as I have issues with it, and as much as a lot of people have issues with it, and so to your point earlier, what we need is a little bit of a balance. So when you talk about regulation, I think we need to get a little bit of the community benefit mindset that you get from socialism and bring it into just the pure profit-driven ethos of capitalism. But yeah, thank you so much, Zagros. I want to talk to you more, but I have to get to the other
Yeah,
people
of course.
waiting.
Yeah.
But if you want to hang around and wait until the very end, I think I'm gonna go until 5 p.m. Eastern, so an hour from now. So like in 45 minutes or so, we maybe could do a quick Q&A. So yeah, if you can hang around
Sounds
for
good,
that,
mate.
we can talk about other stuff. So
Sounds
thank you,
good.
Zagros.
Thanks for having me, man.
Pleasure as always. So Friendly Muslim, are you still there? You could just message in the private chat and we can have you on next. Friendly Muslim is here. So Friendly Muslim is, as the name would suggest, a theist, a Muslim. And so it'd be interesting to get someone's perspective who is a believer. Before we get to Friendly Muslim, I want to share some comments from the live chat. So Gerwalk, thank you for joining in as always. So Gerwalk says, the sect of Christianity I came from believes in climate change and acts against it because everyone has the light, a piece of the deity within them. So do it to protect people, the light. So interesting. So again, within Christianity, there's all these different ways of taking this kind of viewpoint on what we should do in the afterlife and how we should have a role in protecting the world. And Dean Kruger, welcome, Dean Kruger says, regarding the climate change issue, I completely see how religious people would not care about it. The world is a doormat for your feet as you go to heaven/Jannah, the paradise in Islam. So thank you for that perspective, Dean. So yeah, Friendly Muslim, if you are ready, I will get you on in 3, 2, 1.
Hello.
Hello, Friendly Muslim. Happy Father's Day to you wherever you are. Oh, you're from the UK, aren't you?
Yeah, we're no, it's not Father's Day here, so it's on a different.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, no, different. It's not here.
I thought it was like
We're-
a global thing.
no, they're different days for. We've got Mother's Day is different to the one in the US and stuff like that. So
Oh, okay.
different have things, but it's a good Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there, and interesting topic this was, and it actually challenged me to think about this because um
Oh, I think we
sorry
lost you for a second.
no, it was fine. I just had a detector going off in the background.
Okay.
It was interesting because someone had mentioned the term green Muslims, and I thought it was a derogatory term, like, well, like, what, now you're going to call us green Muslims? Is that another derogatory term for the Muslims? And turns out there are green Muslims. There are
Really?
environmental jihadists. So, it's not the greatest marketing, but yes, they do care about the environment. And it is a form of, actually, the word jihad has actually been taken to a left field, but, it is the
Yeah.
struggle against certain things, and combating climate change is part of the struggle. But in terms of marketing, I don't think we could use that in the best light. I really,
Unfortunately, it does have that stigma, and I agree that it is an unfair stigma to just call jihad, people killing other people.
yeah,
That's one facet of it, arguably.
yeah, we don't like to talk about that one too much, but
Yeah. Let's not get into that for this one. Yeah, but please continue.
the low level one is smiling and being charitable and good to your neighbor. That's the good one. Yeah, and then I thought that's not bad, but then I was like, man, you'll just get some extremists like threatening their neighbor for not recycling, and then this whole jihad thing gets taken out of control. So I was like, but yeah, no, people have used Muslims are very much for climate fighting and protecting the environment, and using it as part of the scripture even and referring to scripture. So there are an organization called Green Muslims. They're based in America, and they have taken verses from the Quran, which have instituted that these is why we have to honor the environment. It was interesting what you said about how it ties into politics also, um, and how from right to the left, because from on the left it would seem that yes, the environment, because we get protests from the left. I mean, there's organizations that will just stand in the middle of the street, they'll block off the road, they'll sit on trains. I mean, they will protest. And they've done it a lot over the last 2 years because they want people to understand that it is a concern now. And then you've got part of the right which says we're in control. We are trying to, it probably in line with capitalism. It is a longer term strategy. So the question is, does politics affect your view on the environment and what you're being fed? Because I know in America there was one presidential campaign, and he was very much pro the environment. I can't remember his name now, but then afterwards it was like, no, it's not as bad. It was just hyped up because of someone wanting to be a president, and this was a tactic they were using, was the environment to get votes. So um, overall, I can see your point also, because I was looking at Muslim countries and countries with high Muslim populations. For example, India and Pakistan do not score high on the environmental scale. Um, so is that economics? Because they've got other situations to worry about. Um, at the moment, I know in Pakistan they're having severe droughts where animals are just, because of the heat and the lack of water supplies, are going, crops are dying, etc. So um, it is something that is a concern. I think Middle East are quite proactive with environmental controls. I don't Saudi, Dubai, I think are quite progressive. Um, so I don't know how much religion it has a part to play on it. You want to read that comment out? Actually, that's quite good.
Oh, sure. Yeah. From Hassan Radwan, who says, my father has an eco friendly organic farm that campaigns on environmental issues, and he is a devout Muslim, albeit somewhat progressive.
Yeah. So yeah, that was an interesting thing. I did want to add for the Hindus, actually, our Hindu brothers, because I didn't see you mention any sort of Hindu representation. So I just googled it. But it said, as worded in the Hindu Declaration on Climate Change, it is a dharmic duty to ensure that we have a functioning, abundant, and bountiful planet. Another central concept to Hinduism is karma, which holds that every action has consequences and that there is a causal relationship between one's actions and one's future fate, even in subsequent lifetimes. Thus, karma is also closely related to this concept of rebirth. So I thought about that quite heavily. I thought, well, if you are going to be reincarnated, and reincarnation can be part of the environment, it's something you'd have an interest in, right? Or what are your thoughts on that?
So I did talk about that a little bit earlier, and so I'm kind of torn. So there's the one side where you could say, well, if you're being reincarnated and your actions here influence how you're going to be reincarnated in the next life, then you should be motivated to care about this planet and be a good steward, fight climate change. There's the other part of me, and I think this is the other side that I think is probably very important too. Just having this idea or a notion that there's something else, there's another continued existence in some form or another, whether you believe in reincarnation or you believe there's a paradise, takes away some of the motivation from doing what's right in this one. Because you could argue, and this is completely hypothetical, you could argue there's someone who's very good Muslim, and he follows all of his, things that he's supposed to do. He prays, he fasts, blah blah blah. And so he might feel that, well, I do all these things, so I don't have to worry about climate change that much because I'm good in Allah's books. The book in the right hand will be much thicker than the book in the left hand, if you get that reference. And so that's what I'm concerned about. How much does this facet affect the mentality, whether you're Muslim or Hindu, compared to this one, where you're thinking I should do something, and the one side where, well, there's something else, so I don't have to worry that much about it.
So, do you also feel that political strategies or government initiatives also play a part in how we view it? Because I
Oh,
remember
definitely.
the first Earth Day and going, wow, like this Earth Day is going to be huge. Like, I mean, it was in like the early 90s, and I remember seeing like the first Earth Day, and it was like, oh, the fishing and the rubbish in the seas. And I thought, wow, this is something that's really going to be important, and we need to act now. And that was in the 90s.
Yeah.
And Christmas is bigger. Why? Also, maybe are we at fault for our social consciousness of the environment? Are we too bogged down in the
The
debate?
everyday of
Yeah,
all
I
it.
mean,
Yeah.
arguing over the age of Aisha, for about, like where there's call-ins and we're arguing about these things and our theologies. And, I mean, commend you for bringing this to, because it got me thinking, like, wow, there's Muslims and they are very proactive on climate change, but I haven't maybe not even heard a chutzpah or a sermon or anything really that's pushed this initiative. And maybe that's something we need to. Maybe that's something that could even unite us. In
I hope
general.
so.
If I, because I mean, there's in India there's a whole Muslim, Hinduism sort of issues going on with nationalism, and you just think, well, you both have it part of scripture, and you're defining rights that you are committed to the environment and the world. Can we agree on that at least? Um, and also the teachings of Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, which is something new that I came across before this stream. That there were certain actions that he did with not wasting water. So, and I think it's quite powerful to use these teachings in a positive light to infiltrate the Muslim Ummah as it is and bring it to our attention and say, rather than subjugating sort of 1.8 billion and, tearing against certain aspects of it, okay, what can we use as good teachings to help people understand their commitment from it? So, yeah, I think I think it's positive. I'm actually very happy that you brought this alight because I think it it is something we need to be more conscious of. And can we use religion in a positive way to re-endorse these positions on climate change? What are your thoughts on using religion in a positive way? Um, to
I think it totally is possible. Um, my concern is it will require a very specific kind of interpretation, and it would require a very new, different kind of mindset from a lot of religious people. But to your point, before we get into that, I wanted to just talk about one thing that you said that was very interesting. It's just this fact that when we're just thinking about the problems, the challenges we face in this life, in this world, climate change might be one of those things that's just so big and so overwhelming that it might just feel like, oh, I can't do anything about it. And so there might be this feeling of not wanting to talk about it because it's just so big. So you want to focus on other things. And to be completely honest with you, so my background's Palestinian. I'm Palestinian. And I sometimes feel that about the whole Palestinian-Israeli conflict, where it's so big, it's this thing that seems so unsolvable that I almost just need to focus on other things just so I can, you know, be a sane person, so I don't just dwell in the misery of thinking about that situation. And when here's something my father, speaking of Father's Day, once said, that if you talk to people who are, living dirt poor or going through a war in Yemen or Syria or wherever, then they're not going to give a damn about climate change because they're just trying to survive. When you're thinking of the people who work in sweatshops in Bangladesh or wherever, their concern is just getting through their shift and feeding their children. They don't have the time or energy or whatever to think about climate change. And you can keep extending that for all sorts of people who maybe are having family issues, or they're just, a student trying to get through their degree or whatever. There's so many problems that, and this is our nature, that have to take precedence beyond climate change just for us to be able to function. And I think that's the challenge that we're facing. And this one is where I think religion could make an improvement if we just viewed it in a different way. Because I think the fact, and this is to you, I guess, the question that I will ask, how much do you think the fact that Islam teaches there's an afterlife can be a detriment to the potential positives that Islam can have in making us do better by this world?
I mean, you've got a point in terms of people, a theme within Islamic preaching is very much sometimes, um, you know, make sure that you're good in this life so that the afterlife is better. And so, again, it is narrative from the leaders within um, the community and the Muslim voices. Like, for example, with this climate change thing, which I was quite surprised, there's 100 imams that have signed up to this climate change um, you know, statement, or how they want to do it. So, but in terms of publicity, I'd say it probably was zero because it wasn't something that I was aware of. But all the other stuff you hear about often. So, um, yeah, no, you've got a point there. It is a factor that we are always, there is a focus of the hereafter, and being right. But then also, if you want to have a successful afterlife, then focus on the things that are important, like being committed to the environment and being an environmental jihadist, is essentially, which is what they've called it, or a green Muslim. Um, so yeah, I think it. You could look at both sides of the coin, for sure. But I'm actually quite proud of the fact that there is a conscious effort on this front of being aware of climate change. The other thing is, what do you think we can do more of? Because I know that I recycle. I'm conscious of my gas usage, etc. Um, my general environmental footprint. Other than that, the big major things that need to happen, are they within our control, or are they something bigger that we need to be talking to our governments? We need to be making sure that there are stronger policies in place and that we are more conscious with each other. Because if we really wanted to, and this is where capitalism comes into it, if we really wanted to, if every country really, really wanted to, right now, and there was an alien invasion, and they sort of said, like Independence Day, all these alien ships came over and said, listen, you've got 5 years, and money isn't the issue, because whatever you got to do, generate this money and then write it off. You know, could we do enough that could completely change the way things are produced, using solar, using wind? I've heard previously there were magnetic engines. I've just seen that someone has made a water engine, that doesn't use any sort of fuel.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, but some of these things aren't new. They were made. People have made them, and governments have bought the patents for them. A lot of things you'll find actually, This is from the conspiracy theorists, but a lot of patterns that have actually would save the earth have been in play for a long time. They're just owned by governments, and if they don't ever come in, and again, tax dollars, capitalism has a part to play in that. I feel.
I definitely agree capitalism has a part to play. I think what we need to do is, first of all, be willing and actually act on sacrificing the luxuries that many of us do have in terms of, our lifestyles, like air conditioning, electricity, and so on and so forth, getting fresh fruit and meat easily delivered to us whenever we want, depending on the country we live in. A lot of things like that, we have to be willing to sacrifice them. And we also just have to be willing to just not be quiet about it and really force our governments to address climate change. I think that's going to be the most important thing we do. And I don't mean, let's go do this Earth Day once a year, or let's, I don't know, do like a protest and bring a sign. I mean, like, we have to be willing to shut down the world to instigate this change. And I don't know if the motivation is there for a lot of people. I sometimes wonder, do I have the motivation to just completely throw my life in upheaval like that? I like to say that I do, but then why am I not doing it? And I could say, well, nobody else around me is doing it, so what am I going to do just on my own? But then if everybody thinks that way, then nothing gets done. So I think that's what's needed. A lot of us, and I'm talking about billions of us, just shutting down and saying we're not going on anymore unless we make these changes and we all make these sacrifices. And the cynic in me says, well, if we look at the pandemic and we look at things like how people were hoarding toilet paper, do we have that capacity within us when the stakes are really, really high? I hope that we do, but I don't know. I hope that it doesn't have to come to the test, but it seems like it will come to that point in the coming decades, and which is a scary thought. And on that kind of doom and gloom, I do want to suggest one thing to you, friendly Muslim. Then, unfortunately, I have to let you go because we do have a few callers, and I want to get to them before the end of the live stream. So, I want you to think of this analogy. So, to your point about how religion can be used as in a positive way to influence us to address climate change, I agree with you. It is possible, but I think the fact that there's a God who plans for all things to be well and that there's an afterlife afterwards taints it. And here's an analogy I want to give you, and I want to hear your thoughts on it. So if you think about someone who has, let's say, wealthy parents, and this person goes off on their own and they lead their lives, and maybe they try to start a business, would that person do things the same way if they didn't have the rich parents to lean on, knowing that if things come to the worst, I can always go back to them and I'll have a house to live, and they'll be able to support me and give me money for rent? Would that person behave the same way as someone who didn't have rich parents that he knows are watching out for him and that will take care of him if the worst thing happens? And would the business in the second scenario actually be more successful than the first scenario? Because in the second scenario, the person has no other alternatives than making this business a success because he has nothing to fall back on. So I'm done. So just putting that analogy to you and your thoughts on it.
That was quite a specific analogy with certain caveats in it. Yeah.
But you see what I'm getting at.
Yeah, no. You're like, okay, look, fine. So because I've got the afterlife, I don't really need to be worried about because I've got the
Precisely.
afterlife. I've got potentially.
I'm just saying how do you think that will affect the mentality of someone in these two different scenarios? Do you think there would be a difference? Let's not talk about the religious one because I know it's a bit of apples and oranges, but I just wanted to suggest it to you to maybe kind of see my point and then take it from there.
No. Do you know? So there are caveats in that where both sides of that coin can be used for So the person that doesn't have anything is going to be more appreciative of what they have. They are not going to waste things because they can't afford to, essentially. So in this life, they're definitely going to be looking at their consumption and how much they consume. The other person may also, maybe I'm just the ever pessimist or optimist, essentially, and I always look for the good in it. But that person also, because they have that extra time, can benefit others and the message of being more consistent and
That's a fair point.
raising awareness, because all these rich folk hold these sort of events for green days and other stuff and appeals. Like, again, Bangladesh has now just been affected by another flood, so those are people with money that we need to raise awareness that there might be aid that's needed. So yeah, the optimist in me overrides the pessimist in me, that there is a degree of evil within people, or selfishness. I think in a way we do have an element of selfishness in us. Um, but I do know that generally, in terms of, you know what, I think the world is so broad, and I've come to realize that we just can't agree on everything. Not everybody's going to agree on the same fact. However, this climate change thing is definitely something, once the facts are in play and it is something that we agree on, we can stand behind. So yeah, in both scenarios, I feel that it could go in both spectrums, for a positive and a negative. In terms of
That's a
you and what
very
you
good
would do,
that's a very good political answer. I love it.
okay, all right.
You'd make a good
Would you not?
politician.
Would you not sacrifice by? What do you think of, quickly, and then I'll go, because I know you got other callers. People that stand in the middle of the road, and people there are. So in the UK, for example, a couple of months ago, there were groups. They'd be at the light. When the light turns red, they will run in front of the cars, hook their arms together, handcuff themselves together, glue themselves together, and bring things to a standstill until the police would come, because they wanted to make noise about climate change and people shouldn't be using their cars. Now, what happened in that scenario was, at points they were being dragged by by people trying to get to work, people trying to get to the hospital, people trying to get their children to school. Do you think that's an effective way of doing things, or do you think that is an extreme way of um, demonstrating the urgency of climate change?
That's a very good question. That's a really great question, because I've thought about that. And funnily enough, someone else shared with me a video of Elsa, actually, the channel follower, who suggested this live stream idea. She sent me a video of a couple, or a man and a woman. I don't know if they're a couple. They basically went to a football game, and your kind of football, friendly Muslim, and they chained themselves or tied themselves to the goalpost. And the question was, does that really do anything? Because at least in their case, it was just a temporary nuisance. But to your example, it actually disrupted people's lives in a sense where they could have done some unintended like harm as a side effect. So let's say someone who didn't make it to the hospital in time. And here's the thing that's so troubling about it. When it's isolated circumstances like that, it's not really going to do much because the machine of life continues. But if everyone did the same thing, let's say today, I would have to think that there would be massive change overnight towards addressing the complaints of the people doing it. So that it's a question of scale for me. When it's so small, then it's not going to do much. It's just going to be a nuisance that's ignored and will, you know, might have some positive benefits, but not much really. Uh, and yet, how are we going to get to the point where we have the mass wide scale disruption that we need to just bring attention to this issue? Obviously, I don't want anyone dying because of this disruption. But how do we get to that point? That's what I don't know. Incremental doesn't seem to be the thing to do because we don't have the time for it. And so it really is this dilemma where I suppose the best thing to do is to vote out the people who aren't doing enough. And yet, how do we convince people to do that, to vote for people who are taking it very seriously? So it's tough. But where's the middle approach? Because your example is not enough. Like your example of what those people did, I should say, is definitely not enough. So it's a great question. I don't really have an answer. I have to
We'll
be
ponder
honest.
that one for the next time, my friend. On that note, I'll go back. But yeah, no, if Zagros and everyone comes back later on for a quick at the end, I'd love to put my 2 cents in on the Ridwan situation also.
Okay, sounds good. See you
All
there,
right.
friendly Muslim. All right, thank you, friendly Muslim. Okay, so yeah, we're running a little bit tight on time. So I have 3 people waiting to call in. Reverend Tacos, you're first in line. So just to make sure I get everyone in, I have to kind of keep it. Let's see, you've got to keep it capped at like about 6 or 7 minutes per person. So Reverend Tacos, I saw some of your comments in the live chat, so it seems like you have a very different, interesting perspective on this issue. If you are here, I can get you in right now. Just let me know in the private chat if you're ready. We also have Tom, who I wonder if you're the Tom I know or not. If you are the Tom I know, good to see you. If you aren't, also good to see you. So Reverend Tacos and Tom, let me know if you are ready to go on. So we're not. Oh, okay. Reverend Tacos is there. So Reverend Tacos, I'm going to keep you on, but I have to keep it a bit short. I hope you can understand. Maybe we can do a part 2 or something. I'm not sure if there's interest. Okay, so you're going to talk short, and then I'll have you on, Tom, and then we'll finish with Soleil Apostate. I probably butchered the pronunciation of that, but I tried my best. Okay, so Reverend, I'm going to get you in 3, 2, 1.
How's it going, folks?
Hello, Reverend. Can I call you Reverend?
Yep. Oh, I want to say hi to the our previous guests.
Oh, great.
Zagros. Yeah. I know all those guys. They're pretty cool dudes.
Yeah, Zagros spoke very highly of you.
Okay, I want to go real quickly because we're running out of time, like you said.
Yeah, let's do it.
I am a big fan of like UFOs, alien abductions as mythology. I'm like science fiction. I love that stuff. Now to your question is, does like religion, well, traditional religion generally, in my opinion, doesn't really care about climate change because they believe in the whole rapture, going to heaven. We're going to get a new earth. We're going to replenish the earth. We're going to get a new earth when the Mashiach comes, right? We know this. So, but yeah, I like the idea of like alternative religions, like UFO cults, aliens, all that kind of stuff. Because like, I don't know if you know a lot about like channelers. We have like these modern new age channelers that allegedly are speaking and communicating with aliens.
Or they channel things, so they're channelers.
And a lot of like the UFO cult and UFO religions, a lot of it is based on like climate change. You got to take care of the earth is dying, you have to do this and that. So although like traditional religion, it's not like an emphasis where we have to take care of the earth because we're going to get a new earth. But then you have like the alternative religions that are like big into like taking care of Mother Earth and Gaia and all that stuff.
Well, would you say you're a theist, an atheist? How would you describe yourself?
No, I think of myself as like more like a theist and not a traditional like religious fanatic believer.
Okay.
You know, I kind of like dabble with a lot of like ideas, and I think, you know, it's fun to like, you know, get into this like esoteric religion and cult and like UFO stuff and aliens, because like the whole community is very fascinating in the sense that you have a bunch of human beings who are terrified that the earth is misbehaving, and they're trying to like, come up with like theories why, and then they created these UFO cults to explain the reason why we have climate change.
Yeah, so I guess it's the same as many other religions, you could argue, in the sense that these kinds of belief systems arose to address the major issues that we're facing today as a coping mechanism almost, and also as a way to just make sense of it and determine what we should do about it.
Yeah, it's sort of like we don't want to talk about it. It's tantamount to going to a doctor and being told, listen, dude, you got 6 months to live, you're dying of cancer. And we can't really, we don't have much treatment for you. You're terminal, you're going to die. You got 6 months, go home and like, you know, make do with whatever time left you have. And like talking about these things, oh my God, oh, there's me, we can go into extinction. What if human beings go into extinction? What if an asteroid hits us? What if the earth stops heating up the planet? What if we freeze up and all die? What if climate change kills us? You know, it's not something we want to talk about. Like, it's like, ugh, I don't want to talk about having cancer. Ugh, get away from me. It's kind of like a denial kind of thing. It's like, yeah, we know what's happening. We know something is going on, but like, let's not talk about it. Let's have some coffee and cake. I mean, it's human nature, you know?
It is. Like we were talking about earlier with Zagros, that it's a little bit of the ostrich burying their head in the sand because it's just too overwhelming to even think about.
I mean, like, it's like, you know, I mean, we can't really, I mean, we have to have compassion on ourselves. We're like, we're a new species. What are we, like 300,000 years old or something? Like, we don't know how to cope with this stuff. It's like, you know, you come home from work, you find a letter by your telephone. Hey Johnny, this is your wife Sarah. I'm leaving you and I'm taking the kids with me because you suck. Like, you know, you come home and you find out your wife and kids are leaving. You know, oh my God, that's traumatic. Same thing with this climate change issue.
It really is, yeah.
I mean, and like if you live in a state like Florida where it's like hot all year round, it's humid, it's like 100 degrees. Oh my God, I live in Arizona, it's 105. I can't shut off my air conditioner, I'll die. You know, what do? You know, it's like, it's either the air conditioner or like you live in a hot house, you live in a 130-degree house. You know, you can't do it. So it's like, what the hell do you do? You know, it's like, you either sacrifice the earth. Yeah, okay, the air conditioner is probably going to heat up the earth even more, but I don't want to die in my 120-degree house. I don't want to roast like a chicken. I got to turn on my air conditioner. You're not going to tell me to shut that damn thing off. I mean, what do you do? I mean, yeah, we could talk about like climate change, how to fix it, what to do, but in reality, it's like, come on, dude. I'm not going to shut off my air conditioner if I got to live in a 120-degree house. It's just not going to happen. You're not taking away my air conditioner. I need that 24 hours a day. You know, it's like, what do you do?
That's the $1 million question, isn't it?
Yeah, and the thing is that we have to have compassion and understanding about ourselves, is that because we don't really have better alternatives. Like, you know, what do? I mean, we use oil because that's all we have. We use nuclear power plants, that's all we have. We used coal because that's all we had. We don't have anything else. Recently, we're talking about solar panels, solar energy, all that stuff. But that's in the last, I don't know, since 1980. I heard about climate change, global warming, like in the 80s when I was a kid. And I was like, well, what's that? I don't know. What's that? It's like, we don't really have better alternatives. And the reality is that whether climate change or global warming is man-made induced, we're causing it. It was inevitable that it was going to come down to this. No question about it. I mean, what else do? We can't survive just chopping a bunch of wood and like trying to heat up our like wood burning stoves. This isn't 1836 in the new world, you know. We're desperate for energy, and we're going to use whatever we have.
No, I agree with you. I think I mean, for all of us, especially who are alive now, we just inherited this world situation, and it is overwhelming. Like, what do we do? And I'd almost say those questions of things could have been done differently are irrelevant in a sense, because this is the reality. This is what we've inherited.
Like the gods didn't give us any alternative science. The gods didn't tell us about, hey guys, you know, I'm going to teach you about solar energy. I'm going to teach you about free energy. No, they told us, hey, take a bunch of wood, chop it up, and use that for heat. That's all the cavemen, the guys, they went out hunting, they killed a bunch of animals, and they took it back to the village, and they took a bunch of wood, they started burning the meat to cook. No one told them about solar energy or solar oven. I mean, we were destined for this. Whether we like it or not, we were destined for this.
Well, the interesting thing,
the gods in mythology let us down.
I mean,
if you
we could frame it
mythologically.
Mythologically, yes, I could say that, or you could say it's part of the plan. We just don't like it because it means our demise. I don't know, but the thing that came to my mind from just talking to you is, I think what has happened to us is we've gone from this place where we feel like we're within nature and we can harness the power of nature and to make our lives better, to this realization just in the past couple of decades of, oh shit, we've reached the point where we can actually impact nature and alter it irrevocably. If you believe that climate change is man-made, which I do, or accelerated by man-made activities at the very least. And I think that's just psychologically, especially for people who are religious, just mind-blowing, because we went from just this thing within this habitat to, it's like ants becoming big and powerful enough that they can destroy their terrarium that they're in. That can shatter so much of your conception of everything, really, to have that kind of power. And right now we're just struggling to cope with it, I think.
Yeah, it's futile. Like, trying to fight it is futile. Like when a hurricane comes and wipes out your whole village, you live in a massive earthquake or tsunami. That's it. You're done. What are you gonna do? You're gonna yell at the earth. You're gonna shoot at it. You're done, dude. When that tsunami comes and takes out your nuclear power plants, you're done. That's it. You're done. There's no way. You can't turn around and say, "Oh, please, Earth, please don't send this earthquake to knock out my nuclear power. Please, Earth, please, Mother Earth." You're done. That's it. We just don't have any better. We don't have better methods to mitigate this stuff. It's so funny because there's this one preacher in Florida, whatever, in the United States. I don't know if we have these preachers in the United States. They love to preach about the climate change. God is gonna send a massive hurricane to wipe out your village because you support gays, because of sin of homosexuality and gay marriage. God is gonna send a hurricane to wipe out your village, brothers and sisters. So you have that too. So you have the so the original question you were posing. Does being religious make you care less about climate change? Well, if you are super religious and you're super uber religion, you can say, well, God controls the earth, God controls the climate, and when God wants to punish you for your sins, he will send an earthquake, he will send a hurricane, he will send a volcano to destroy your land like Sodom and Gomorrah because of your sins. So you see, traditional religion has always been about God controls the environment, God controls the earth, God controls the land, God controls everything. So if God wants to punish us, he'll send an earthquake. Because he don't like LGBTQ, he's going to send an earthquake to your city. So you see what I mean? So
I do.
It's there's so much complexity within our religion and our state of mind and our state of reference. We just don't know what to do about these problems. We just don't know. We have good ideas, but we don't know we don't have the good strategies to implement these ideas. We're done, dude. We're done.
Well, I'm sorry to let you go on this note, Reverend, but I have to go on to the next caller. Well, thank you so much for sharing. I love your performance of the apocalyptic Reverend. That was great.
Before I go, you guys check out UFO cults and climate change and all this crap about like channeling aliens who want to help us. Because a lot of it is very fun and very interesting and very fascinating. It's good entertainment.
And you have a fan in the live chat, Reverend. Imran says, "Okay, I want to hear a whole sermon from Reverend Tacos now." So,
you want me to put on my pastor voice?
I love the way you say sin too. That the little extra bit of oomph at the end of sin.
I used to do this bit with a lot of my fundamentalist Christian friends. I don't know if you want to do it now. The Bible says, he who sins shall go to hell. God is going to send an earthquake to destroy your land because you let the gays have their marriage. It's a blasphemy against the Lord. And it would go something to that effect.
Well, thank you so much again, Reverend. Perhaps you can come in for another call-in when we have a bit more time.
Topic.
For a different topic, and then we can get a bit more of your Reverend parody, which is pretty funny.
But in the meantime, you guys, don't worry about your air conditioner. Keep it on. You don't want to die of heat stroke in your house with 20 degrees out.
Especially if you live in the Middle East, where I grew up.
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
tough
when
to not live
24
with air
degrees out,
conditioning.
forget it.
Very true. But yeah, thank
All
you
right,
so
you
much
guys.
again, Reverend. And all right, we'll go to Tom next. Tom, are you waiting? Sorry it took so long to get to you, Tom. And Soleil, I'm so appreciative that you're still waiting too. So I'm gonna have to give both of you 5 minutes because the Reverend, he had to share his sermon, as we understand. There were a couple of things I just wanted to highlight from the live chat. So Claudius, thank you so much for the super chat, much appreciated as well. And Sammy, who was on our last live stream saying that he was in a bit of trouble, thankfully says that the threat on him turned out to be a bluff. That's great to hear. And a couple of stats from Elsa just regarding the issues we discussed today. So Elsa says, if you look at the greenhouse gas emissions per capita, many Gulf states, which are Muslim countries, are at the top of the list. Interesting. And Elsa also says, research has shown that 25% is a tipping point for large-scale social change. So 25% participation of, I guess, whatever group it happens to be. And Elsa says we need to reach that 25% in the environmental movement. And she's also heard of the 3.5% rule, 3.5% of a population participating in protests, and is very likely to bring about change. So we wouldn't need billions according to this rule. We would need 3.5% of the world population, which is still a lot of people, and I don't think we're close to that yet, but who knows? Yeah. So I'm not as cynical as the Reverend was when the Reverend ended with his "we're done" positive note, but I am hopeful that just having conversations like this can get us maybe to that 3.5%. We shall see. And all right, okay, so Tom, I'm going to get you in now, and then Soleil will get to you right after. So Tom, in 3, 2, 1.
Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear, Tom. Welcome.
Thank you. Awesome. So I'll try to keep it brief, but in response to the original question,
yes, please.
I would say that sort of climate change denial is far more of a political phenomenon than it is a religious one. Because again, I can only speak from Christianity because that's my background. But I would say there's a very, very small fringe fundamentalist minority who believe that the present, environmental disasters, natural disasters, all that is the divine force wiping out humanity. And then after that, it's split pretty equally between just out and out climate change denial and climate change being a man-made phenomenon that we need to take seriously. And I mean, the other thing to highlight too is, from my experience, climate change denial is an exclusively American phenomenon, right? So again, I don't know about the Muslim world or about climate change denial politics in the Muslim world, but I will say that certainly, I'm going to say before the turn of the past century, around 2000, climate change denial, well, again, environmentalism was a pretty bipartisan issue, right? Because when Al Gore started his campaign in the 70s, he was considered a conservative, quote unquote, Democrat back when such a thing existed. But no, and I think basically what's happened is the oil industry via the Republican Party has pushed the climate change myth in America, which has then been adopted by Fox News and is then adopted by its evangelical conservative audience, who primarily believe it for political reasons, but then have to retroactively create a theology around it, like it's God's will, or you know what I mean, right? Or
Yeah.
you know, God gave us control over the earth, therefore we can ruin it if we want to, whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's why I said no to the original question. I would say, certainly in the American context, being religious makes you more likely to be conservative, which makes you more likely to be a climate change denier. But again, not that we have time, but I would be interested in knowing what the political side of climate change denial looks like in the Muslim world versus in the largely Christian world.
That is an interesting question. Let me see if I can get to that at the very end of our little call. There was one thing I wanted to ask you first. So you talked a little bit about climate change denial. What do you think of the whole idea that because I categorized religious people in the beginning of the stream. I'm not sure if you caught that or not, but what do you think of religious people who do think climate change is real, but maybe might not be motivated to do much about it because they have a belief that this is part of God's plan and that we should just let it happen, especially if it ushers in the end times faster?
Well,
What do you think of that whole idea?
I think that's, I mean, I don't agree with it personally, but I think that's very much on the fundamentalist end of Christianity, because I think the mainstream conservative evangelical view is that it simply doesn't exist.
Really? In America, you mean specifically?
America and even Canada, where, I mean, evangelicalism is a much smaller movement. I would say most of the evangelicals I grew up with would be out and out climate change denial. Either it doesn't exist, or you know, all the other sort of Republican talking points.
For the reasons you already explained, yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay, so like for the people who do have that kind of mentality that I was asking about, you would say it's just a small minority of fundamentalists.
It's certainly within Christianity, yes.
Okay. And to just answer your question then, I would say within the Muslim world, it really does, I think, echo the whole Christian mindset in terms of you'll have the fundamentalists who will just say, well, this is God's plan. So this is talking about people who maybe they do believe climate change is happening. They'll say this is part of God's plan, and we just have to respect that and realize our own limitations and let what may happen happen. And so you'll have this kind of passive, how would I describe it? Passive inactivity, a passive attitude towards it, which I think is probably a coping mechanism, as I discussed earlier, and also just reflective of the whole nature of God within Islam, which is he's got us he's taking care of us, so don't worry about it too much. Worst case scenario, we'll be in paradise faster. So to the extent to how much that is a mentality within the Muslim world, it's hard to say. What I can say is in my upbringing, climate change was not really brought up. It wasn't really something that was talked about a lot. And it seems like this whole movement that people are discussing of green Muslims, green environmental Muslims, or environmental jihadists, which Robert was saying earlier was kind of a funny term, is more of a recent thing, which I think is a good sign. I'm not sure how much that has to do with the religion itself or just the external factors that are motivating Muslims to channel their efforts through their religion, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah, it does. Anyways, I will move on and let Soleil say his piece.
Oh, well, before I let you go, Tom, I just did want to quickly mention that it is a possibility that you might be joining me for a very separate and exclusive live stream in the near future. So this is a preview of it, I suppose, your little appearance here. I'm glad to see you here. This was not planned. I did not know you were going to be coming. I was wondering, is this the Tom that I know?
Yes. Anyways, I'm gonna head out, but to quote Ernie, I'll be back.
Yes, indeed you will, and I look forward to it. Thank you so much for joining and sharing your insights, Tom. Looking forward to talking to you in the future.
Looking forward to talking to you too.
All right. Thank you so much, Tom. And all right, Soleil, thank you so much for waiting. I really appreciate it. We're saving the best for last, hopefully. So we'll get to Soleil now if you are ready, and I'll put you on in 3, 2, 1.
Hello, how are you?
Hello. How's it going?
Yeah, I'm fine. Thank you. It was interesting tonight, and I love this subject. You know, I can introduce myself. I am
Please do.
I am a French Algerian ex-Muslim. and I created a podcast in French where ex-Muslim they tell their testimonies. So yes, it's me. But I'm really concerned about climate change and about pollution. If I wasn't an ex-Muslim, I would have created a channel about planting trees. You know, it is a big subject for me. So, as an ex-Muslim, I want to tell you directly that Islam is the worst thing. But I know hadith who say that Muhammad said that if you plant a tree, you will receive hasanat even after you die. You know, it's my father who told me that, because my father, he built a mosque in my city, and then they found a hadith who said the one who build a mosque or plant a tree, he will receive hasanat for a long time, even after his death. So it is a really good lesson from Muhammad that I cannot deny. It is really good. However, nobody followed it. Nobody. Because if you see the Muslim world, it is a lot of desert land. You know, but it's not because of Islam, because it was a desert even before Islam. For me, for example, I am from Algeria, North Africa, and there is a big desert. It's called the Sahara. Sahara. You know it?
In English, we would say the Sahara Desert. Yeah.
Yeah. So it is a big desert. It is really hot, and during summer, even in the cities in Algeria, it is so hot. Like I know degrees in French. I don't know. It is a 50 degrees, but it's not
50
the same.
50 degrees Celsius. Yeah, that's pretty hot.
Yes. Yeah, it's really hot. So everyone sleeps during the day, and they live during the night because it is really so hot. But the Muslim countries, they didn't take seriously this challenge, and I think it should be their top priority, because the desert is advancing. It is the desert is growing, and it is really dangerous. And I think it is a really it should be the priority of Muslim countries to plant trees to stop the desert. But I know, I think that in religion, why should people plant trees and better the earth? In my mind, when I was a religious, I didn't care about earth because I was hoping to go to paradise. Earth is just a place where we are tested. It is a platform where it is a test for Muslims, and then they would enter paradise. And even for Abrahamic religions, the earth, it is doomed, because the end of time, the apocalypse, it is the apocalypse. It is written in Hadith. They say that at the end of the world, at the end of the time, Muslims they will fight Jews. I think you know the stories.
Yeah.
That a Jew he will hide behind a tree or a rock, and the tree will speak. It will say, "Come, there is a Jew who is hiding behind me." You know this?
I think I remember it vaguely.
Okay. So yes, so the earth is doomed for the religions. So why would they care? Why would they better the planet? Because their dream is to go to paradise. So they don't care about Earth.
And I do
You know what I mean?
remember, yeah, I do. And I remember being also taught some of the signs of the Judgment Day was droughts, not much rain, and extreme weather events, which are all things that are tied to climate change. And when you're taught that, we're taught that it is a horrifying thing, this catastrophic event, but it is worth it and part of, you know, the eventual going to the afterlife and paradise if you happen to be Muslim and not having sinned enough to, you know, be tortured in hell, whether for a while or for eternity or however you want to describe it. So I think you and I, we have a very much the same mindset, Soleil, on our view on Islam on it.
And you know, when I traveled in Algeria in vacation,
yeah,
I used to see all the desert, all the land which doesn't have trees, doesn't have grass, and I was shocked because in my mind, God is abundance. God, in my mind, if God loved Muslim countries and Muslims, Allah, He would make these countries green, you know. So I was, it was an argument for me. Why in the disbelievers' countries it is green, we have a lot of trees, and the land is good, and in Muslim countries it's desert. You know, it's a bad land. So I was thinking, God, He doesn't like these countries. I could not imagine, you know, because normally the Muslims are the best of the creatures. So why would Allah abandon them in the hot summer?
You remind me of something I was taught in school during my Islamic education in school. And what my teacher said was that this was actually a punishment from Allah because the people before there were Muslims, you know, were, you know, not good people, had strayed away from the path of Allah. So he punished them by turning all those lands into desert and by making the lands of the infidels fruitful. So this was something I was taught as a child. So for everything, there's an explanation, Soleil. Always an explanation. Yeah.
It is weird.
Yeah. But Soleil, I unfortunately have to say we have to go.
Okay.
It was a pleasure having you on, and I recently followed you on Twitter. I just discovered you, so I'm glad that you came on for this call-in. It was great to hear your perspective, and I would love for you to call in the future as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much again, Soleil, and I hope you have a wonderful Sunday.
You too.
Take care.
Goodbye.
Bye. All right. Thank you so much, Soleil, and I really appreciate your patience. I'm sorry I couldn't have you for a little bit longer because you were waiting from very early on, but I have something to do right after this, so hard cap on the time, unfortunately. And Hassan makes the great point, and I do want to make it here, that we can't generalize, as he says. Many Muslims believe it is an Islamic duty to be as guardians of the planet, and this is something you can see with the green Muslim efforts that we were talking about earlier. And Elsa also points out what I was mentioning earlier, that she's also spoken to quite a few Muslims who linked droughts and extreme weather to Judgment Day, not climate change. And so let's see what the status of our poll is now at the very end of our call-in. So does being religious make you care less about climate change? 68% say yes, 32% say no. But of course, I think, as we've discovered just from our chats, like there is no clear-cut answer to such a big question like that. I think it depends on so many things. My concern is that it tends to lead people towards caring less about climate change. This is just my personal perspective based on my experiences and observations. And so, yeah, let's just do a couple minutes of like a quick Q&A. Zagros, if you're still here and you want to just kind of share quickly the whole apostate prophet controversy, you can join back in the call-in. As I mentioned, I don't know much about it. What I will say is I've always felt a bit torn about apostate prophet. As I mentioned earlier, he is one of the biggest voices in the ex-Muslim community online. Zagros, I'm going to share the link with you right now. I'm going to put it in the live chat so you can jump back in. You should see it, I think. Let me know if you don't see it. Okay, but yeah, so that's my perspective on it, that he's a very prominent voice, and I'm not a big fan of his approach many times. It seems very adversarial, trying to antagonize Muslims as much as possible, which you could argue has a purpose because it brings more attention. But in my view, Muslims are the people we should be helping the most as ex-Muslims, because we're trying to show them why we left and show them what the issues are of the religion so they can leave too if this is what they decide. Because I think it's hard to generalize again, but I think a lot of Muslims would be better off if they left Islam for a lot of reasons, as long as it's safe to do so wherever you are. And so, okay, we have Friendly Muslim and Zagros here. If it's okay with both of you, I'm going to bring you both on at the same time. Maybe we can have like a quick little chat about it. Okay. Right, Zagros, you are on.
Long time no see.
Yeah. So, Zagros, if you can give everyone a little bit of a primer on what happened most recently. Let's assume people know now who Apostate Prophet roughly is. Big ex-Muslim YouTuber, social media activist. He's done things like, I can't remember what, he's done things to the Quran publicly, like maybe stepped on it, or see, I don't even know what that is very well. But he's done things that have been intentionally done to aggravate Muslims. So that's my primer. So Friendly Muslim says in the private chat, he ate the Quran. Okay, so Friendly Muslim, let me know if you want to join in. We'll have like a brief freeway discussion. Okay, so Friendly Muslim will come in as well. So maybe I can just hear quickly from both of you your perspective on it. Zagros, you can go first.
Sure. Friendly, unless you already have like a nice coherent thing in mind.
No, you tweeted about it, so I think you had a first position on it.
All right, sure. All right, so I think, well, he's been, somewhat aggressive towards Islam for a long time, but what I think was the last drop, at least for Twitter or the Muslim community on Twitter, was his reinstating the largely believed thing about Muhammad having married Aisha when she was 6 and having had sexual relationships with her when she was 9. And he did that because I think he was trying to make a point that, this is for vast numbers of Muslims a fact, at least they accept it as a fact. Whether we can ourselves verify it historically and, call it an actual fact, that I don't think is possible. But given that some people do believe it to be a fact and do use that fact to themselves marry or engage in sexual activity with prepubescent or adolescent, like little girls, it's a topic that Apostate Prophet is very sensitive about, and rightly so, I think. So you might have heard of that Indian politician Nupur Sharma. You are muted, SS.
Zagros, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I don't have much more time.
Oh,
so
my bad.
Just want to give Friendly.
Sorry.
No,
Yeah,
it's totally okay. Friendly Muslim, I just want to give you a couple minutes to kind of share your perspective on it. Yeah, I know there's more to say, Zagros, for sure.
This actually might be a great topic for another stream.
Maybe, right?
Freedom of speech. Do we really have freedom of speech? And what is freedom of speech? But yeah, no, that would be a good topic. But yeah, briefly, I know he got banned about a week ago, and that was because he said he mentioned in a tweet that Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, had a mental health issue, probably from epilepsy. So that was his first ban that he received, and he had a thread about it. So there was a whole host of threads about this topic, and he got banned, and then he got reinstated. So he was already on a warning. And then in India, there's a lot of persecution also happening of Muslims in India, and a politician.
This is what Zagros was talking about. Okay.
Yeah, she made an insulting comment on news, basically. That has gone worldwide now, and also death threats came from behalf of Muslims also. So I think AP was reinstating the fact that she said what she said. Does she really need to, the threats, are they valid or not? Death threats, because it is a police issue, and she has been formally charged by the police, and she's currently wanted by the police at the moment for questioning, and she's gone missing, as in the last 24 hours.
Oh, wow.
The Delhi police are looking for her to bring her in for questioning, and she, but to cut a long story short, she was charged. In the meantime, she was suspended from her position as in a political party, and Saudi Arabia, a number of Arab countries called in their embassies, Indian ambassadors, to discuss the issue and declare that they are not happy at the remarks and the insults made upon the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. So that's where we're kind of at the moment with the whole situation.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing, Friendly Muslim.
That was a pretty good summary.
Okay, you'd agree with that summary, Zagros?
I think.
Yeah. Well, okay. So I have time for you to both share your just like one quick final thought, and then I have to go, unfortunately. So Zagros, you can go first, and then I'll give the last thought to Friendly Muslim.
Okay. So I don't really have any thoughts. I just think that Twitter shouldn't have banned him because he did not infringe of Twitter's policies. And I think the reason why he got banned was due to mass reports on part of Muslims on Twitter, who I think are coordinating quite well. I think Twitter has to look at such reports, especially when a large channel such as AP is involved. They have to look at it case by case and not just rely on large numbers of reports to deem something to be an infringement of their policies. I think he was a victim of Twitter's basically lack of manpower, perhaps, or whatever, or like corruption, whatever. Like, he didn't do anything that required a ban or demanded a ban, in my view.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Zagros. And Friendly Muslim, your 2 cents.
Yeah, my 2 cents. The first cent is he does have another account, so he hasn't been devastated by not being on Twitter. So he's got his other Twitter account. B, yes, we need to discuss freedom of speech and what are the lines of it in terms of Twitter, YouTube, etc. Because it goes both ways. Muslims need to be reported where they are insulting, homophobic, etc., also. So it goes both ways, but look forward to possibly another stream on this topic.
Perhaps, yeah. I'm gonna have to do my research on it because, like I said, I'm just learning from what you both just shared with me, and I really appreciate that. And perhaps it is something worth addressing on the channel in more detail. So thank you to both of you.
Can I say 2 things real quickly?
Real quick, Zagros.
Real quick. Just to Friendly Muslim. That backup secondary account, I think, will go soon as well. So yeah, that's it.
We shall see.
And
Inshallah.
SS, I would actually, if you have the time now or perhaps later, like to hear what are your potential contentions or your disagreements with AP that I think you kind of hinted of. You hinted at.
Are you talking to me or Friendly Muslim?
To you, SS.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, we can talk about that for sure.
All right, cool, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Zagros, and thank you, Friendly Muslim. You have a good night. All right, thank you, everyone, and I'll just leave you the words of Hassan Radwan, who says, I support Apostate Prophet's right to speak. So again, I'm going to do some research and look into this before I speak up about it. I do believe in the power of freedom of speech. I think this is an issue that Twitter has struggled with a lot. And Before I go, I did want to show you what my father sent me for Father's Day. He sent me something. Let me see if I can find it this time. So this is giving you an insight into my father's sense of humor and mentality. So this is the picture he sent me with a couple of individual sperms with names, and the words on the mug say, "We used to live in your balls, Dad. Thank you for not pulling out." We're freaking awesome. So yeah, that's my father's sense of humor for you. I did not know how to respond to that. Very awkward. So yeah, happy Father's Day to everyone who is celebrating Father's Day. I didn't realize it wasn't a global thing on the same day. And I'll be back with another live stream soon, perhaps one about apostate prophet. Maybe I'll do a poll to see if there's an interest in doing that. All right, take care, everyone.